Nolan's life was taken because I do not believe he accidentally drowned. If he drowned, he was forcibly drowned. And we'll get to that in a minute. If Nolan drowned, he was forcibly drowned. He did not accidentally drown. He was a great swimmer. Miss me with the nonsense. That boy did not drown. If he drowned, it was by force.
Those are the words of Dr. Umar Johnson, and they have now pushed the Nolan Wells investigation into an entirely new conversation. But why has Dr. Umar entered this case? What exactly does he believe happened to Nolan? And what evidence actually supports or contradicts the theory he is presenting? Nolan Wells' death has remained surrounded by unanswered questions ever since the 18-year-old disappeared during a 4th of July boat trip to Horn Island. His body was later found, but the circumstances surrounding his death have continued to raise questions. And now Dr. Umar Johnson, a psychologist, educator, author, and outspoken public figure, has stepped into the controversy with a series of claims about what he believes happened to Nolan. He isn't an investigator on the case. He isn't speaking on behalf of law enforcement. And what he is saying should not be confused with an official finding. But his comments are attracting attention because he is challenging the way the case has been handled. And he is questioning whether the public has been told the full story. Before we get into those claims, let's go back to the beginning. Because to understand why Dr. Umar is speaking about Nolan Wells now, we first need to understand what happened on Horn Island, what investigators have confirmed, what Nolan's friends have said, and what the autopsy has, and has not, revealed. And by the time we get to Dr. Umar's theory, you'll understand why his comments have created a completely new conversation around this case. If you want factual updates on major cases like this, subscribe to Case Watch, click the bell icon, and stay with us as we break down what we know and what remains unanswered. But before we get to what Dr. Umar believes happened, there is another part of this case that cannot be ignored. What exactly happened during those final hours on Horn Island? According to the accounts that have been made public, Nolan went to Horn Island with friends on July 4th. At some point, he became separated from the group. One account said Nolan stayed behind on the island after meeting a young woman, while the others returned by boat. The boat's movements and the circumstances surrounding its return have since become part of the investigation. And that is important because Nolan's friends have repeatedly denied having anything to do with his death. Their attorneys have also emphasized that they are cooperating with authorities and want the truth to come out. But as the investigation continued, the public was left with more questions than answers. Nolan's family raised concerns about information missing from his phone. His attorney, Ben Crump, has said that multiple messages were deleted from Nolan's phone before it was returned to his family. Investigators have also examined a phone call involving the boat after Nolan was no longer aboard. According to ABC News, a friend contacted a towing company and reported that the boat was sinking and needed assistance. The recording was later obtained by ABC News, and investigators have been analyzing the call for possible clues. None of that by itself proves that Nolan was murdered. But these details help explain why so many questions continue to surround the case. And they also help explain why Dr. Umar believes people should not simply accept the easiest explanation. Dr. Umar's theory is disturbing. He has said that he believes Nolan was already dead before he entered the water. He has suggested that Nolan may have been killed on the boat, and that his body was later placed into the water. He has also discussed the possibility that Nolan's body could have been kept somewhere before being moved. But again, none of those claims have been established by law enforcement. There is currently no publicly released forensic finding proving that Nolan was killed on the boat. In fact, the independent autopsy commissioned by Nolan's family listed the cause and manner of death as undetermined. And the official state autopsy has been completed, but its results have not been released publicly. That distinction matters, because when a case becomes this emotional, it is easy for theories to start sounding like facts. Dr. Umar is giving viewers his interpretation of the evidence and circumstances. Investigators, meanwhile, are still working through the evidence. And the two things are not the same. But Umar isn't stopping there. He has also questioned the people who were closest to Nolan during that trip. One of the people he has focused on is Warren Hudson. Umar questioned Hudson's description of his relationship with Nolan, including his claim of being Nolan's best friend. That is a particularly sensitive issue because Hudson was one of the young men who was with Nolan during the July 4th trip.
Who did Nolan tell Warren was his best friend? Who did Nolan ever tell Tristan was his best friend.
But there is something viewers need to remember. Being present with someone before their death does not make that person responsible for the death. Hudson has not been publicly charged with killing Nolan, and his attorneys have repeatedly denied that he or the other friends had anything to do with Nolan's death. In fact, the friends recently took an unusual step. They went back to Horn Island. On August 7th, 2 of Nolan's friends returned to the island with their attorneys. Their lawyers said the purpose was to examine the location and understand the physical setting for themselves. They were not officially searching the island on behalf of law enforcement. They were conducting their own investigation while defending themselves against the accusations that have surrounded them. Reports from the visit described it as an emotional experience. The same island where Nolan disappeared was now the place where his friends were trying to understand what could have happened to him. And their attorneys have continued to insist that the young men had nothing to do with Nolan's death. That creates a fascinating contradiction at the center of this story. Nolan's friends say they want the truth. Nolan's family says they want the truth. Dr. Umar says he wants the truth. But they do not necessarily agree on what the evidence means. And that brings us back to one of Umar's biggest criticisms. The grand jury. The official state autopsy has been completed, but the public has not been allowed to see the findings. The district attorney's office has said the case materials will be presented to a grand jury once the investigation is complete. According to officials, this is standard procedure for deaths that may be unnatural or suspicious. Dr. Umar, however, strongly disagrees with keeping the information away from the public. His concern is simple. What happens if the grand jury reviews the evidence and decides there isn't enough to bring charges? What happens if Nolan's family is left with the same unanswered questions? And what happens if the public never learns what the autopsy actually found? These are questions Umar wants answered now. He has also criticized Ben Crump and Reverend Al Sharpton for not putting enough pressure on authorities. According to reporting from the Shade Room, Umar argued that the two should have called for an FBI-led investigation instead of relying primarily on the Jackson County Sheriff's Department. He also called for a stronger public campaign to pressure authorities. That is a significant accusation. But it is also where we need to slow down. There is a difference between saying an investigation should be more aggressive and saying investigators have failed to investigate. There is also a difference between demanding transparency and claiming that authorities are hiding evidence. At this point, the public does not have enough information to make either conclusion with certainty. And that is exactly why Nolan's autopsy is so important. The independent examination did not provide the definitive answer many people were hoping for. Instead, it left the cause and manner of death undetermined. The state examination could contain additional information, but those findings remain private while the investigation continues. So the biggest question is still sitting there. What killed Nolan Wells? Was it an accident? Was it drowning? Was there another medical or environmental factor? Or, as Dr. Umar believes, was Nolan already dead before he entered the water? We don't have a publicly confirmed answer yet. And that uncertainty is what has allowed the theories surrounding this case to grow. But there is another detail that makes the situation even more complicated. Dr. Umar has not simply criticized the local investigation. He has connected Nolan's case to a broader argument about how deaths involving Black Americans are investigated and how much pressure authorities face when the circumstances are disputed. During the interview, he also discussed another Mississippi death and used it to argue that officials need to be pushed harder in cases involving Black victims. Some of those broader claims have themselves been challenged or lacked supporting evidence, so they should not be treated as established facts. That is important because it shows what Dr. Umar is bringing into this conversation. He isn't approaching Nolan's death as just another unexplained case. He sees it as part of a larger issue involving race, justice, accountability, and trust in Mississippi. And that helps explain why his comments have resonated with some people while provoking strong criticism from others. But regardless of where someone stands on Umar's opinions, one fact remains. Nolan Wells is dead. He was 18 years old. His family is still waiting for answers. And the official investigation has not publicly resolved the central question of how he died. Dr. Umar Johnson has now put forward a theory. He believes Nolan may have been killed before entering the water. He believes the investigation needs greater outside pressure. He wants federal involvement. He has challenged the approach of Ben Crump and Al Sharpton. He has questioned the accounts surrounding Nolan's friends. And he has warned that simply waiting for a secret grand jury process may not be enough. But the evidence available to the public does not currently prove his theory. That is the line we have to keep clear. Because Nolan's story deserves answers. But those answers have to come from evidence. Not rumors. Not social media speculation. And not assumptions about the people who were with him. The next major development could come when authorities decide what to do with the completed state autopsy and toxicology findings. Until then, the mystery remains. And perhaps the biggest question Dr. Umar has forced back into the spotlight is not simply what happened to Nolan. It is this. Was everything that could be known about Nolan's final hours actually uncovered? Or are there still pieces of the story that investigators have not been able to explain? For Nolan's family, that question is not entertainment. It is personal. They have repeatedly said they want the truth. And until the official findings are released and the investigation reaches its next stage, the public is left waiting alongside them. This case is far from over. And now, with Dr. Umar Johnson publicly challenging the investigation and offering his own theory, the pressure for answers is only getting louder. For now, Dr. Umar Johnson has raised questions, but he has not provided the final answers. His theory remains a theory. The official autopsy findings remain private, and the investigation into Nolan Wells' death is still unfolding. But one thing is certain. An 18-year-old went to Horn Island expecting to enjoy a holiday with friends, and he never made it home. His family is still waiting to understand what happened during those final hours. And perhaps that is the most important thing to remember as this case continues. Behind every theory, every headline, and every unanswered question is a family waiting for the truth. Whether that truth ultimately supports Dr. Umar's concerns or leads investigators in an entirely different direction, Nolan deserves for that truth to be found. And until it is, the questions surrounding his death will remain. What really happened to Nolan Wells on Horn Island? And why does Dr. Umar Johnson believe there is still so much more to this story? We will continue to follow the case as new information emerges. This is Case Watch. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next update.